reason I wanted to talk to you was because a few months ago, I started to see some articles that were claiming that researchers found or think they have found Noah's Ark, and you're part of that research team currently, right?
Correct. Yes.
So what's going on with Noah's Ark, generally speaking, right now?
Well, yeah, the site's been in the news a lot last year, but it was actually first discovered in 1960 by a Turkish army captain. And he was mapping out Eastern Turkey for the military. And he noticed this boat formation in the mountains of Ararat. And of course, that got everybody excited because in the Bible, this is the area Noah's Ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. And so seeing a boat shape in the mountains got people thinking, well, maybe this is Noah's Ark. The following year in 1960, a Turkish American expedition went out there for 2 days and they did some investigation. And they came back a little negative, saying, maybe it's a freak of nature, the natural formation. But a couple of the scientists in the group privately told each other that this needs to be investigated more than just 2 days. But the site kind of lost interest in the news and people kind of forgot about it. In the late 1970s, an American explorer researcher, Ron Wyatt, got involved and he started investigating it. And he really promoted it in the 1980s as being Noah's Ark. He started doing his own investigations of the site and bringing in other people. And as a kid, that's how I first learned about it in the early 90s, was from his research. I first went to the site while in college in 1977, but it was in 2019 that we did our first scientific work on the site with the Science Channel filming it. We did ground penetrating radar, a GPR, which allows you to look below the surface without disturbing the soil. And then that was some of the newer analysis of that result was in the news last year about the tunnels and possible rooms that we're seeing. And then in 2024, we also did chemical analysis. We took 88 samples inside and outside of the boat formation to see what's going on with the soil. And it showed that there's almost 2.5 times more organic matter inside the boat from these random sites versus right outside. So again, the theory that it's a decayed wooden ship below the ground would affect the organic matter of the soil. And that's what the analysis is showing. And so we're just, going through different steps in our research. But those are some of the most recent things we've been doing there.
Okay, perfect. I want to touch on everything you said, but before we do that, I want to start at the beginning, literally speaking. Noah's Ark. It's a story from the Bible.
Hmm.
But
Yes.
what do we know from the Bible that's valuable to us right now? And what's the significance of Noah's Ark, both historically and theologically speaking?
Are you a believer in the story, or are you atheist, or do you?
Um, well, I'm a believer. I'm Catholic. I'm not sure if I believe in the ark as a literal story,
Or you
historically
might be.
speaking, more
Okay.
metaphorically or whatever.
Okay.
I'm open, but
Yeah. Okay. Well, in the Bible, yeah, then, there's a story of Noah and the flood,
mhm.
Genesis chapters 6, 7, and 8. In these chapter, according to the biblical account, the world was wicked, and God found one man who was righteous. His name was Noah. He had a family, and God told him that he was going to destroy the earth and for him to build an ark. And so the Bible gives very general um, information about the ark. It says it was 300 cubits wide, 50 cubits, long, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. So not very specific. It had 3 decks, one door, and a window at the top. It doesn't mention anything else, like where they slept, where's the restrooms, how many animals. But it said that this was made for the animals and Noah and his family to survive the flood. According to the Bible, Old and New Testament, Noah and his family, which would be 8 people total, survived a worldwide flood that destroyed the earth and the animals that were inside the ark. So then in Genesis chapter 8, it says that after the flood ended, the boat landed in the mountains of Ararat. Now, the English word Ararat actually comes from the name of an ancient country that used to be there during the Iron Age, especially. It's Urartu. This kingdom of Urartu was a mountainous kingdom in eastern Turkey and into Armenia and parts of Iran. And this location, given in the Bible, is not a specific peak. It doesn't say this mountain or this GPS location. It says the mountains of this country, and so it's a broader area. That's where this boat-shaped object is in that area. Of course, there's many people in the past and currently looking for it in other locations, and others, believe the site that we're researching is the ark. Many others do not believe, and they're looking still. So you have different ideas as to where the ark could be. We're the only site that actually has an actual physical site you can go walk on and look at and research. And from the biblical standpoint, that's the story. Whether it's literary or not, if we can prove that this is the ark, then I think that would show whether it's just a story for like teaching morals or not. Definitely the story is repeated in the New Testament by Christ and the disciples and the author of the different books in the New Testament, who mentioned that the story will be similar to the end of days, the end of the earth. Christ mentions, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the coming of the Son of Man. So you have that connection between the end of the days, end of the earth, and the wickedness during the time of Noah. Um, in regards to, let's see what else. I think that kind of covers the biblical story. Being, it's not that very detailed in the Bible, and that's kind of where that's why there's a lot of mystery as to where it is, for example, and if it's even real, because you're talking about a global disaster and obviously a story, a miracle, because a boat with people and animals surviving.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I want to go back on a few things you said. But first of all, regardless of whether the story is real or not, literally speaking, uh, there appears to be evidence that there was, or that there could have been, a flood. Right? I mean, the flood story is a story that has appeared practically in all religions, right? And there have been some scientific studies that point that there could have been a flood. I mean, not necessarily a flood that flooded
The
the
whole earth,
entire Earth,
yeah,
but some
yeah,
catastrophic events that had to do with lots of raining that changed the way of the world, right?
yeah. Definitely, the story is worldwide. You find it in many cultures. Someone did research on this, and at this time, I can't think off the top of my head. But I don't know if there's like a couple hundred stories worldwide that had the same type of idea, where there was a water involved, a flood, and people had to build some type of vessel to survive. And so, of course, the most famous ones are the Gilgamesh epic, and the other ones associated with Mesopotamia, which are older than they're outside the Bible, but they're even older than the biblical account, and have very similar aspects of a family and animals surviving. So, yeah, for sure, there's a global aspect to this story, and whether the flood itself is global, people can debate it, but definitely it was a disaster that left an impression on people around the world somehow. So whether that means they had a common flood story that just spread out, or there was a common event that was around the world, and people then remembered it later. It's definitely interesting. Beyond that, I don't have much more details, but I do, think there's elements that are true in it. I mean, for me, the whole thing is true, but if someone wants to debate whether it's global or not, that's another thing. But definitely, I don't think the whole thing is fake.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting because I mean, as you said, if the same story, generally speaking, appears over and over in different religions, I mean, it kind of points to a shared common history, right? That sometime it could
Yeah,
have happened.
I mean, and you could even say, if you believe in the biblical account with the flood, then you'd even believe in the Tower of Babel, which has this idea that after the flood, mankind was spread out by God. They were trying to stay all together and build one city and one tower, and then God dispersed them repopulate the earth. So you can say they took that story with them in their own languages and took it to their wherever they ended up migrating to around the world. So that's one mechanism in the Bible that was explain how the story spread out. That they were all from one area, and if you believe the biblical account, then it would be coming from somewhere in the Middle East, whether it's Mesopotamia or Turkey. This idea that people spread out from there after the flood.
Yeah. And you mentioned two very interesting things, or things that I find very interesting regarding the biblical account specifically. Uh, the story is very short, right? I'm
Yeah.
sometimes amazed how short the stories in the Old Testament are. You know, these stories that we all know and have influenced our culture so much, and it's just a few lines. But in those few lines, there are two things that are mentioned that are very interesting. One, the dimensions of the boat; they are
Yeah.
very specific. And two, the place where the ark landed, right? Which you described as a region of mountains, not necessarily a specific coordinate. Uh,
Yeah.
well, these things I found interesting because for two reasons. One, they're very specific, and two, uh, in relation to your research, the research has found that what you guys think could be the ark matches kind of exactly the measurements given in the Bible, and also matches the resting place described in the Bible, right?
Yeah, and that's the only reason why people got interested in it. I mean, let's say you find an object that doesn't not look like a boat, and say look like a barn or a building, and it's 3 times as long as what the Bible gives. Then of course you're going to be like, well, this is something else. But because it's boat shaped and it's in the mountains of Ararat, and you have especially the length, 300 Royal Egyptian cubits. It's like kind of like not a divine approval, but it's kind of, it's an exact match. What are the odds? So if it is a natural formation, it just coincidentally it equals the size given in the Bible. So I think that that is what everyone has back from the '60s on up to today. Why there is interest in the site. You have the location right; it's not in China; it's in mountains of Ararat. You have it being ship shaped. It's not a circle or a barn or something else, and it is the length given in the Bible. So starting with those three things, then you build from there. And so that interest got different researchers involved, and including myself. And that's where we are today is because of that. Those things that are listed in the Bible that matches with this site. So, of course, those will say, well, it's all coincidental and it's just a natural formation. Well, that's fine. But, there's a site, though, that is boat shaped at exactly the length. And so we're going to continue our research into it because no one's really researched the site. You have those say, no, it's not. But, they're basing their stuff on not actual ground research with a permit from Turkey or doing anything. So or they have other motives, you can say, because they're looking for the site. Those who attack it, they're usually looking for it someplace else already, and they raise their money, and so it's kind of a business for them. And so they're either looking up on the Big Ararat Mountain or maybe another mountain, but the Big Ararat's the most popular alternative site. So you got to question those who are not willing to actually do research on this site, but just write it off. I think they're just like the original group that went out there after 2 days. People in that group said, "Hey, I think we wrote it off too soon. We didn't put enough effort into our investigation." You have people, you look at other archaeological sites. They investigate these sites for many decades. They put thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars into it. and they still debate what the sites are. Even they find an inscription, they debate. These archaeologists, you get 10 archaeologists in the room, and they have 10 different opinions. So, it's a well-known fact. Uh, but it shows the effort involved in trying to piece. It's like a puzzle. You're trying to put things together, and none of that type of effort has been put into the site. You have people right away saying, "Oh, it's geology," and they put forth a theory. But like one popular theory is it's a solid block of rock, and that was actually written up in a peer-reviewed journal. But the guy, the Turkish, his name is Murat, this Turkish geologist who wrote it, the other Turkish geologist that we work with, who has been actually investigating the site since the 80s, Dr. Bayrak Tutan, he said, this guy doesn't know anything. This is a very complex mountainside landslide. This guy's idea that it's a solid block of rock is easy disproven. You can even walk out there and see it's a dirt earthen formation. You have rocks and boulders sticking out, but it is not this solid block of limestone rock like this guy wrote in an article. And so you wonder, where did he get that idea? If he didn't do anything work, if he didn't do any work on the site, it makes you question his interpretation of the data, or what if he did anything at all out there. But then that's quoted by other people over and over because it's now in a peer-reviewed journal. So I think more work has to be done on it, and that's where we're at. We think it's pointing in the right direction because of again, the length, the location, the shape, and we believe that those who have written it off are the ideas they've put forth, and there's like maybe two or three or four uh, different theories, usually dealing with a rock. It doesn't make any sense at the site from our investigation, especially. And so we're going to continue working on it. And those who don't think it is, they can go do something else or look for their own arc. But it's not stopping us.
Yeah, no, it sounds like too much coincidence, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, just one of the rare chances that it is all natural. Okay, then let's find it out. That's why I tell people, it's like, if you don't think this is the arc, then show me a better one, and I'll go research that, promote it. Until that time, this is the best candidate, I believe. Even and then those who attack us for saying, "Oh, it's all geology," especially those who say it's up on the Mount Ararat. Well, they're basically attacking their own position because their site has many geological problems with this stratovolcano that's sitting there. Has zero evidence that it was once underwater. So how does this boat shape gets way up on top of that huge mountain, the tallest mountain in Turkey, on the side of it? If you know how a stratovolcano builds, it's a specific type of volcano that has many different eruptions. It's also called a composite, has different layers, and it builds the mountain as each eruption builds up on itself. So to say the very last eruption has a boat on the outside surface that's still up near the top defies everything about how a mountain's formed. And also, they say it's in a glacier, which is one of these glaciers are scraping the rocks. These glaciers form mountains, and they shed them. They shed, every, I don't know how often the one on Mount Ararat does, but let's say every 500 years or every 1,000 years, the glacier with the ice and, the snow will move itself off. So how can you put the because these so-called eyewitness accounts say there's a perfectly preserved boat up there, or in two pieces or three pieces, but still it hasn't been ground to dust and it's still up on top of the mountain on the outside edge. And yet these guys are saying we're ignoring geology, and those are the most vocal critics of the site, are those trying to fundraise and climb the mountain, but they ignore this on the geological side. They ignore everything. Plus, they ignore the basic um, thing of the fact that now thousands of tourists climb the mountain because you can get a permit very easily, $50, whatever. And these tour groups in Turkey take people up. They want to climb the tallest mountain in Turkey. No one has come back with a selfie of Noah's Ark up there. So, 100 years ago, they could claim that because no one was climbing this remote mountain in eastern Turkey. Now, every summer, or even to the winter, a lot of tour groups going up there, and no one has said, "Hey, I found a piece of the Ark," or "Here's a photograph of the Ark." And you have Google Earth now. 50 years ago, you could not use Google Earth. There was no Google Earth. Now you have Google Earth, so you can stay in your home and you just go around the mountain, and try to find a boat sticking out. And again, a lot of things that were said in the past like these people who have criticized and ran off the Durupinar site in the past and promoted their own sites. They could have done it in the past because they didn't have these tools that people can use. You know, you can sit in your living room and look up on Google. If you want to hike, you can climb the mountain with a Turkish guide. That will you're not going to find the ark. The mountain's been covered by a lot of people, so it's not like a hidden crevice somewhere. No, so then people have moved on. Less researchers now focus on the mountain. They're claiming, well, maybe it's on this other mountain range, but again, no site. It's too bad that they don't say, oh, well, maybe we should revisit the Durupinar site and work with us or do on their own, figure out what's going on with the why is there a boat formation there that exactly the length given in the Bible. So yeah, for those, it's a small group looking for Noah's Ark. It's not like a lot of people, but for those who are, it's you're gonna have this scattered interest, and everyone has their own idea, and nobody working together. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Um, if it was only a natural rock formation, if it is within a mountainous region, a region that's, I assume it's very big, that has a lot of mountains, what are the chances that if it's a natural formation, that that's the only natural formation that looks like that in the whole region? Could that be
Yeah.
normal? Is that not normal?
Yeah,
Or
so according, I don't, I'm quoting without giving a reference, but Dr. Byron Tuton even asked him that question, and he said that he's a geologist. He's retired now, but he was assistant professor there in Ataturk University, and he's the one we work with on the site. But he said there's not. This is like a unique formation in the world. There's people who might say, "Hey, look at this photo or this site," but it doesn't have the distinguished characteristics of this site that we're working. There might be something that has a long oval shape, but if you look at it from a certain angle, or like this site, you can look straight down. You look from an angle, it's a boat shape. Others, you turn it at a certain angle, you lose your boat shape. It's a cliff face, or it's half of a shape, or not even a boat shape. It's an oval or something else. He really believes this is unique. Now, if you go back to like the 1960s, so you have again a general area. It's not in China according to the Bible. It's in the mountains of Ararat. Well, most of the mountains of Ararat is in Turkey. Most of that kingdom was in the modern day country of Turkey. And when the Turks surveyed their country, because 59 they joined NATO, and this area was bordering the then Soviet Union. Armenia was right there. Of course, they also have Iran, but especially Armenia. So they're surveying this area with high altitude military aircraft, taking pictures, mapping out the villages, the roads. They didn't come back and say, "Hey, we found like 5 boat formations." This is why this one got the news. It was in the news because there's only one found. Yet today, people say that you'll see some YouTube videos saying, "Oh no, this is not unique. There's others around." No, in 1959, when this was discovered, and even through the 60s when they were finished their survey, they didn't come back every year with another boat formation. So this is very unique. And if they find a boat formation in China, okay, that's in China. But you look at the biblical specifics, you have to have a boat that's in the mountains of Ararat, and this is where we're at, and this, and then exact length. So, it's very difficult to get around that. So yeah, you have to come up with different explanations, and so people try. If they don't believe it's Noah's Ark, they'll do their best to find another explanation because they have to. Because what is it doing there? This boat shape.
yeah. So that's the reason why it actually got like discovered, right? This member of the military saw the thing while he was making a round at the place. He took the picture and it ignited the interest, right?
It was the boat formation. I mean, the biggest thing that obviously, if you do an aerial photograph, you're trying to identify objects. You see buildings and roads. It was this boat shape that showed up that got the people interested.
Did the guy that took the photo at the beginning thought it was Noah's Ark, or did he just said, "Ah, this looks funny. Look at this picture."
Well, the guy who took it, he's flying high altitude. He's a different guy who discovered it. The airplane pilot, they're just doing their mission, going back and forth on a route. They don't see, this is not digital. They don't know what they're taking pictures of. When the canisters of film is brought back to the military headquarters, and The mapping division's looking, they developed the film and now they're using this film to make a map. That guy, who was Captain Ilhan Durupinar, he discovered the boat shape. And yes, he believed he knew this is the eastern Turkey, it's around Mount Ararat, and the Muslims believe in Noah and the flood. It's not a Christian belief, but he right away, because he discovered it on 9/11, but in 1 week was September, like, it was 17, or 18 or 19, something like that. It hit the news. There was no photos. It's just a little blurb in the Turkish national newspaper, which I have the original article. It just basically says a boat shape. It mentions Noah's Ark, and at that time, there's no Google Earth, so they thought it was on the slope of Mount Ararat. But at any rate, that was in the news. And then 1 month later, because they must have done more research, they actually released the photograph in October of '59, and that one went around the world. American newspapers, I assume other places, and also Turkish news, and it showed the boat shape. The military released the picture, the photo.
Okay, and once the picture was released and it got attention, you mentioned earlier Ron Wyatt and stuff. There were a lot of people that were interested in the site, right? And start, I don't know, making research or
Yeah, not just him, but yeah, there's mainly Americans, obviously, Christians interested, looking for Noah's Ark, who believed in the story. Obviously, if you don't believe in the story, you're not going to waste money looking for it. So, these people, put the effort in and came out there, especially the first group, which was 1960, June of 1960. And then a lot of Americans and other researchers got involved in the 80s. That was the big, through the 80s and early 90s. And then it died down. And then 2000, because after 2010, there's a couple more, it's only one individual in 2014. He did some scans, an acquaintance of mine, and I was there when they did some ERT scans for that. In 2019, we started our effort, which is ongoing, but that's kind of how it progressed. So it comes and goes, the interest. So for ours, we're trying to sustain the interest and finish as much as we can. But in the past, yes, in some decades, like the '70s, there's not much going on about it. The early '60s, that's when it was discovered. But yeah.
so uh, in the early moments when it was like discovered and promoted and stuff, like in the 60s and 80s that you mentioned, what was the kind of research that was done, and how was it done in the sense that, I mean, to this day we still don't know if it is or it isn't, but there's no definitive conclusion on either side. So what was done in those early times?
So the first thing they did on the site, they wanted to see it. They had the high altitude photograph, the 1960s. So they walked on it. Okay, it's an Earth shape. At first they thought it was strange. You read some of their accounts because they were expecting like a ship just like laying there, which is unrealistic. So when they get there, and it's Earth, and Earth in shape. Like, okay, and then you're on the side of a mountain, and back then, even today, is kind of remote. So what can you do? Well, they ended up dynamiting the side of it, trying to get inside as a last resort. And it's just, again, bits and pieces of dirt and rocks came out, um, and that was it. But then, the other thing was to measure it, and that's when you can still kind of do that with the aerial photograph, but especially on the ground, you can measure it in detail. And that's when they realized, okay, it's exactly the shape, the length given in the Bible. So that was a good thing. But that was it for the '60s. Again, some of the members of that group thought they were too hasty and they wanted to go back, but no one did. But it took Ron Wyatt, who came along, and his first thing he saw in his first trip in '77. But when he came back in '79, he did one good thing was taking soil samples, kind of what we did. But he took 5 samples from inside the boat and one outside. It was not enough for a random survey, but it got interesting results showing that there was higher carbon, almost 4 times higher percent of carbon inside from his one sample versus right outside. So that was good, but it got him more interested. So for him, it's like, okay, there's something going on with this boat shape. Then he decides to bring in, because he saw high iron content in his soil samples. He brought in metal detectors in 80, I think it was '84, with the 84, '85. '84. They brought metal detectors in '85 too, and that's when they started for them. Because again, the Turks had never allowed anyone to excavate. We can talk about that later about why there are different reasons, but right now everything's non-destructive. He did metal detector scans and he got a pattern of metal. And when he did this in front of some other researchers, they got interested. And so we had people like David Fazold, John Bob Gardner, who changed his mind about the site. But initially, these are some people who were interested because of these metal detector scans showing a pattern inside the boat shape. So the next step was in '86 when they did radar. The very first radar ever used in Turkey for this was used here. And it was showing a pattern below the ground on the initial scan. And at that time, that's when Dr. Salih Bayraktutan got involved because the Turkish government asked him to, check it out and get involved. And so he's since '85, he's been investigating the site, and he does believe it's not a natural formations and nothing explains it naturally. He does believe you have to use geology. Like he said, you can't. Someone asked him, "Is this a natural object or is it man-made?" He says it's both. If it's sitting there for thousands of years and decays away, you have to explain the current state by understanding geology, sedimentology, the forces, earthquakes, the fault lines in the area. And then, of course, you have to then use, like we did with our chemical analysis, you have to understand soil sciences and how a wooden boat would decay if this is a Noah's Ark ship. And then how would that affect the soil? What's really interesting in the past, what's really kind of ruined it, the whole Noah's Ark search, are people coming down with stories saying, "I saw this perfectly preserved boat up in the ice somewhere using a Mount Ararat." Um, and so that's gotten people's heads that the Ark has to be perfectly preserved. No one truly understood. Even today, when you look at scientific archaeological research on wooden ships like Bronze Age, Roman ships, Greek ships, Viking burial ships. I always talk about the Sutton Hoo boat in England. This is a burial ship from the Middle Ages. And when they excavated it, and they made a Netflix movie out of it, but when they excavated this ship, the artifacts now in the British Museum, and they got the shape of the hull. All the wood was gone, and you have the oxidized rivets in place. But you can look on the internet, Sutton Hoo. You'll see the black and white photos. It was 1930s. They excavated it. Just look up any other ship, the Bosporus Straits in Istanbul, where they excavated the harbor of the Byzantine empires, which emperor built this harbor. But they found, I think it was half a dozen wooden vessels, and you have like the ship shape, or you have just the hull. Again, it depends on what covered it, and if it's a marine environment or the oxygen is gone, it's deprived, so you can have more preservation of the wood. But other times you just have the shape. But again, it shows how wooden vessels decay. And so when you look at this site, you're not going to find like wood sticking out or a complete vessel, but you have the shape, and now you have a chemical imprint in the soil, and we can do a lot more with the chemical testing that we have not done yet to understand the type of carbon, the type of chemical residue in the soil. Because one thing everyone's noticed, even since the '60s, when Captain Durupinar mentioned this in the interview before he passed away, he said when they went there in the '60s, they realized that this ship shape had a hardened material. The soil is harder than the soil around it. So you got to explain that. And why is the soil harder? And, the Bible talks about a wooden vessel covered with pitch, like a waterproofing material inside and out. If that decays away over thousands of years, what would that do to the soil? Is this an explanation as why this soil is different? And so there's things like that no one's done yet. That's why I don't write off the site, because there's a lot more work to do, and there's newer science and newer technology and all that. But the basics they did in the '80s, in the '60s, you have the measurements, you had the metal detector scans, and the other non destructive survey was the GPR. That was it. You know, if you look at like all the research done, you know, that's the basics right there. Basic chemical analysis of, but not a complete. You know, we did 88 samples, so that gave us even that you can expand and get better. But you know, we're at the bare minimum, you could say almost a little more. But the 88 samples got us a random survey inside and outside of the site. So you, because you know, if you walk in a field and you know, unless it's tilled and the soil's mixed, you know, perfectly, you can get a clump of dirt on one site, and then 5 feet away, you get another clump. And this one could have high iron, you know, if it's like a natural field on a mountainside. And over here could have less iron or more like phosphorus. It's just because the soil is not the same. It's not mixed. I don't know what the other word is. Uh, there's a word for that, but you know, it's not perfectly mixed together. So that's what you have to do a random survey. So we had 22 sites. From each of those 22 sites, we took 4 samples around the locations. That gives us a good a mix, and that's what was tested at a Turkey university. For whatever reason, no one's done it. You know, Ron, you know, for his benefit, he not being an archaeologist. I'm not an archaeologist, but we were working when we did this. I was a soil scientist who designed the survey, and then the geologist was there, the Turkish geologist, and they both took the samples. You know, Ron, he had the idea, "Oh, hey, let's test the soil, see what's going on." And so even though it wasn't a perfect random survey, definitely just from his small number of samples, he got some interesting results with the higher carbon. So, again, I think that's why there is legitimate criticism. For me, it's more like, hey, you have the ship shape in the right location. That's exactly the length. Let's go from there. Other people have been more like they're right away saying this is Noah's Ark. You know, I believe it's Noah's Ark, personal opinion. But you know, if I want to prove it to somebody, we need more data, like to finish it. And, you know, we're continuing. So you know, obviously, people ask us questions like you or others, we'll give them what we've done so far and why we think it's Noah's Ark. But there's definitely a lot more work to be done. And sadly, you know, in the 80s, these different groups, you know, they did the basics that were allowed for non-destructive work, and that was it. Now Ron did try to excavate many times. The Turks, though, turned him down. There's some say, well, because he wasn't an archaeologist, and that might have been a good thing for him not to have done it. I don't know how he would have done it. Might have ruined it, especially if you realize how fragile the site is, and you're looking at more doing like if we're to get like our next goal is core sampling to go deep in the site. But you have to check every centimeter, you know, every layer, and figure out the history, you know, how the material covered it, how this site decayed, what can it tell us about what was once there, like the type, either type of wood or ancient pollen or ancient DNA, or like what's in the soil, and then the sequence that it was covered by the dirt, you know, over the years. It's different from just saying, "Hey, here's a piece of timber sticking out, and it looks like, you know, rib timbers of a ship or something." No, our radar, even our radar work, and Ron, he was showing a pattern, but our radar work too is showing that you know, there's something going on below the surface, that is not just a decayed boat. It shows that there's something preserved below, or possibly another idea could be that the boat decayed away, and then other material filled in where where like where it used to be wood, and that's why you're showing a difference between the soil around it, because the GPR is showing right angles, parallel lines, showing layers. The ERT is showing layers. You know, that's just not the soil that's just sitting there, but it's something different from the soil itself. So whether that's the actual petrified wood, which would be great, but if it's not, then it could just be the shape of what was once there that decayed and then got filled in at one time, that is now different from the current soil. So again, it's a very careful investigation has to be done. If it is Noah's Ark, then you don't want it. You only have one chance. You can't, you know, archaeology is a destructive science. You can't just go in there with a bulldozer or dynamite and do something that you'll regret later. You can't put it all back together. Our next goal, like, is very careful. We're hoping we get permission to core drill. The Turks are leery even about core drilling, even though you're talking about, you know, maybe a 3 centimeter hole or something. But I think we can convince them on that. I'm fine with people having legitimate criticism or saying you should do more before you say it's Noah's Ark, okay, that's fine. We're continuing that. But for someone to write it off already and say, well, you guys are, scamming people, or this is a con job. Well, okay, it's a boat. We don't build a boat. It's right there. There's boat shape. It makes it sound like we try to plant something there. No, we're investigating it. And those who have done it in the past, investigation, we're going beyond that. We're not trying to say they did anything wrong, but we're just doing more than what they did. And that's, the job's not done. So, that's my opinion about, why people still criticize the site. It's fine. You can have legitimate criticism, but we're going to continue the research.
Yeah, I think that pretty much explains the back and forth with this site, right? Not only in time, like before, like this cycle of interest in that you were mentioning, but also within people, right? Because from what I looked up, there were scientists or researchers that at first they believed, then they didn't, they did again, and so on, right?
Yeah, 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 I think some people point to Fazold because so he came in, and the reason why he got involved, and I think this is the one guy who say he went back and forth, is because he didn't think the ark could be on the top of the mountain. And so he heard in the news, this is the early 80s, that the astronaut Jim Irwin, who was a Christian, he believed that God created the world. So he was, creationist. Jim Irwin, who walked on the moon, he was looking for Noah's Ark. And so Fazold contacted him, said, hey, I don't think you guys should be looking up on the mountain. He told Irwin, I think it's down in the valley because of the dynamics of the glacier and the lava from an eruption pushing anything on it to the base. So Irwin told him, hey, why don't you get in contact with this guy named Ron Wyatt, who Irwin had just met, because he's looking across the valley at this other site that was discovered earlier. And so that's how Fazil got involved. And so when Ron showed him they did the metal detector scans. This was Fazil's first trip was March of '85. He got excited, and so Fazil then got really into it. There was then they in '86 they brought in Dr. John Baumgartner, and he got excited. So you had, and he was a legitimate scientist, a geophysicist. And so you had this group that briefly worked together. Then they all went their own ways, doing their own research. But Fazil later is, and I used to talk to him a lot on the phone, like I used to talk to Ron. I remember one time I called him and he's like, Andrew, we got a problem. I said, what? He said, okay, if this is Noah's Ark, how does he, because, he was a big promoter of the anchor stones. So they're not part of the site, but they're away. So the stones with the holes. And he was saying these are anchor stones like Ron first claimed, and that's what Ron got people interested in these stones. And Fazil said, look, since Noah's Ark started in Mesopotamia, there are no giant rocks down there. Mesopotamia, like they build the cities out of brick. There's no huge slabs of basalt. There's no huge slabs of rocks. So he said, this is a problem. So one time, I remember this was the mid 90s or end of the 90s. He passed away in 98. But he was saying, well, maybe this is the site the ancients saw a boat shape. They said, "Oh, this is." They made the story up, like they see the site and they knew the flood. So that was one thing he did. Now I stopped really talking to him because he became a kind of a downer talking to him. So I didn't really talk to him much after a while. But another friend of mine did, and this is where the story came around because I think the friend was in some of these discussion groups with atheists, and he was saying, "Hey, Fazil, before he died, actually went back and said, I believe this is Noah's Ark." Now I didn't talk to Fazil for a couple years before he died, so I don't know if he changed his mind, but other people have said he did. So he went back and forth. But he did team up and write an article with Ian Plimer, who recently passed away, actually. Not Ian Plimer, Professor Collins. I think Collins was a Christian, but I think he was an evolutionist. And Collins wrote this article in 95 or 96. And I forget what they called it, something about boat formation. Collins' idea was it was a geosyncline. So this is a deformed rock formation with different layers of rocks. That's synclines, anticlines and synclines. These are results of folding of rocks that they get exposed at the surface, and they can form on an oblong oval shape, but they're huge. These are big geological sites that you can look them up on Google. And so that, and he's never been there, but Collins wrote this article saying this is how you get a boat shape. Dr. Salibar Tutan, again, the geologist that we work with, over and over, and I need to put out the videos. He was in Switzerland just last month, and we filmed him really giving clear answers because he can ramble too. But he gave us clear answers as to what's wrong with the syncline theory. And right away he explained the whole thing. Like he's like, look, this site has no layers of rocks that matches the layers on the other side of the valley or anything. It's earthen. And you don't synclines are not earthen formations. They're rock folds with different layers, and the youngest layers in the middle. And you can see these layers. When you're walking on the site, there is no rock folds, there's no layers of rocks. It's not a rock formation, it's not a solid piece of rock. It's not, yeah, anything like that. There's boulders here and there, and there's a big boulder in the middle. But our ERT scans show that that boulder is a free floating boulder. It's not even bedrock. So again, people are throwing out these ideas without doing proper research on the ground. Collins got his paper with Fazil published. And so people say, hey, Fazil changed his mind. Like he thinks it's natural now. And so that became a big thing in the 90s, I remember. And so I didn't really talk to him after that because, he didn't think it was Noah's Ark. So was interested. 97, I went out there myself. As a tourist, I didn't do anything but take pictures. Um, that was one researcher, Fazil, and like I said it before, a friend of mine said that he changed his mind before he died to go back. Who knows? I don't know. The other guy who did change his mind, and he's still alive and he has not gone back, is Dr. John Baumgartner, a geophysicist. And I've talked, and again, um, it always goes back to a rock. You have to say, well, what is this formation? So it's always back to a rock. And so for him, he says, well, this is basement rock. It's a ridge of basement rock right there. And the reason why you have a shape is because the earth flow, the mud flow, went around it and it created a ship shape. This happens to be the length of Noah's Ark. And then he claims that they core drilled in '88 and it hit basement rock about 4 meters down, very close to the surface. So in his mind, how could this be Noah's Ark? Because 4 meters down is 12 feet. And so how does Noah's Ark is 12 feet tall? So again, this idea that you don't have a decayed ship almost all gone. He was still looking for a preserved ship, I guess. But the idea that his core, this is the big question then, what was that core drilling he's talking about in '88? Because that's his '87 radar with Dr. Salibar Teton. So the two teamed up, Dr. Sali and Baumgartner. They both are alive, but they have two different stories. Baumgartner, and we've interviewed him over and over. '87, they did the GPR. And they found a double layer below the surface of material across almost the whole site. At the end of and this is a written report, and we have it on our website, noahsarkscans.com. But in that report, you'll see it says there's nothing in our investigation, I'm summarizing or paraphrasing, that goes against the idea that this could be Noah's Ark. So that's the written report from the GPR. '88, they come around and they try to do core drilling. Now, according to Baumgartner, they got good results. They did 4 attempts. They had bad equipment, but they were able to get data. And so thus, because of the core drilling, they know where the basement rock is, and this site is shallow, so it's not Noah's Ark. And so he changes his mind, but basically the next year, by '89, he's telling people he doesn't think it's Noah's Ark. Well, it's interesting. Right after the 80, let's see, I think it's always summertime they work. So I believe it was the summer of '88 that they core drilled or attempted to. His newsletter by September, he had a little newsletter that he would send out to friends. The quote in it mentions that they basically say that you can't use core drilling to understand an archaeological site fully because you could be within like a centimeter of a wall or whatever, and you're just getting this core going down. So it's just giving you data for that little area. That's why when they do archaeology, they do these big pits, 5 meter squares. But he was saying that basically he wasn't negative from the core results. Now, I talked to Sali Barak Tutan, and we had him again in Switzerland. We talked about this again, explained the core drill. He says they used the wrong equipment. He had, he was in charge as the local scientist. He partnered with the American group. He said when they brought the equipment in, when he brought the equipment in, he said Turkey did not have the best equipment back then, and it was a water cooling system. The core bit is going through. He said this site is mainly earth, loose soil, clay. So as soon as you shoot down this jet of water to cool the bit, it destroyed all your data. So he said when we pulled out the core, you had some pebbles at the bottom, all the dirt was gone. So in fact, he said they even did less. Baumgartner claiming they did 4 or 5 cores. Ollie says they only did a couple. He says once they realized the problem is like there's no point of continuing. And so he said you cannot draw any conclusions from the coring. Now, I have not seen anyone produce a video of exactly what they did there, but based on Baumgartner not showing anybody over all these years an actual core or any data from a core, but just talking about it, I don't think they got a good core. And so that means no one has ever done that, and that's what we're trying to do. But you can't use core like the 88 core attempt to say it disproves the boat because it was a bad job done. And on top of it, then you have to ask, well, then what really changed Baumgartner's mind? Because he's going back saying it was the core attempt, and they got good data and that changed his mind. And in his newsletter a couple months after that didn't mention anything like that. The Turkish scientists that worked with him said no, we got zero data. So again, the people, yeah, again, it's just like this type of I don't know what you want to call it shenanigans. It's like, okay, let's all be open. Do the result. Like, when we did our GPR, not to brag, but we just hired random people. It wasn't like some friends. In fact, some of the people on the trip were atheists. They said, we're here to do a job, like the LiDAR guy. When we did the GPR, these are people that I knew need to make a video about that trip. So I'm a believer, so I believe God opened the way and brought the right people in, and we had perfect weather when they were out there working because you can't have rain when you're doing GPR. You get less penetration in the soil. We had perfect weather that week, and the day they stopped, the next day they had an extra day to tour around the area, the GPR team, and that day it rained. So the 3 days they worked, sunny, no clouds. You can see all the way to Armenia. I mean, it was crystal clear. Um, but we brought in these random people, and then we took the data. They were data collecting in the field. You can see stuff on the screen that got the Science Channel interested, but the biggest results came back the next like 3 or 4 months later when the American archaeologists reviewed it and said, "Hey, there's a series of right angles 21 feet down on this western side." We didn't know that. We didn't plant that. He said, "Hey, there's something here that suggests that's not just natural below the surface." And after that, 2023, after I reconnected with Dr. Sali, I asked him and said, "Hey, I have all this data. We couldn't get in contact. Maybe the original guy don't want to work anymore on Noah's Ark, but that guy who found the right angles, he was like incognito, whatever you call it. He was not talking to me." So I said, "Okay, no problem." So I asked Sali when I reconnected, say, "Do you know of a geophysicist who can hopefully for free review our raw data?" I had all the raw data from the company. And he said, "Yeah, which is this lady. She's American, American lady. She has her own company in the East Coast. He has 30 or 40 years experience as a geophysicist. As we contacted her and she was willing to do it, after 6 months, she came back and said, "Hey, did you guys dig some tunnels here? I'm seeing a straight tunnel, 4 or 5 meters down." And that's what was the news last year. It finally went into the news, about 2 years after she told us this, because some reporters contacted me and asked if we had anything new. But she had found this, and then we saw these faint hash. You could say it depends on how deep the arc is. They look like beams for the ceiling support or the walls, whatever there are. There's a whole series of them below the surface, really deep, like at the bottom of our data. But here's somebody who had nothing to do with Noah's Ark. I don't know her. I never met her. I did a Zoom call with her and a lot of emails. But she reviewed our data and came back and said, "Hey, look what we've seen. We're seeing, well, if you interpret this as a boat, then hey, these are central corridors, hallways, possible rooms." Same with the soil. When we did the soil test not last year, since 2026, in 2024, I had an Australian soil scientist on my tour. And beforehand, I knew he was coming. I didn't know who he was, but he was just coming on the tour. So he was a Christian. He wanted to see the site. But on that tour, we took some drone photographs of the boat. And even on the ground, I pointed out to the geologist, the Turkish geologist, Dr. Salih Titan, and Bill Crabtree, who's on my YouTube channel. He was interviewed on the Australian press. He's a soil scientist with a master's degree. But I pointed out to them, I said, "Hey, the grass inside this site is growing different color. It's yellow. There's a shade of yellow. Right outside the boat formation, it's a green grass." So it's like, okay, that means the soil is different. What's what? I said, hey, let's design some type of test to see if we can figure out what's going on because it is distinct grass, and you can see in the photographs. And so they did. They designed it. They were actually saying, I don't know, we could figure out what's. They said, just get the chemical analysis done. Let's see what happens. By December that year, Solly, who had prepped all the samples and sent it off to his old university, they came back and they gave us results, and there's like 5 or 6 things we tested for, pH, phosphorus, salinity, organic matter. Anyways, we just did test all for these 22 samples. It was 88 total, but the 4 we combined into 22 from each of the sites, gave a good mix. They dried out the samples, they prepped it as opposed to, they did all the analysis, and we got the results back. We didn't know what we were going to get. Again, we're just doing the test, seeing what the results are, whether it's good or bad. And again, it came back and it was like, oh, wow, you're talking about, again, if this is just regular soil on a mountainside that went around a rock, all the soil around the rock should be the same, whether it's inside the boat shape or the outside. But no, it's totally different soil inside in regards to organic matter. Like the show that's way much higher, like 2.5 times more organic matter inside, suggestive that whatever was there had a lot of organic material. If you think it was a massive wooden boat decaying over thousands of years, you think it's still leaving some type of chemical imprint in the soil content. So, I mentioned before, there's still a lot more we can do with our samples and future samples that people haven't thought about because they're thinking of just trying to find a big wooden ship, preserved. But if you're looking at, hey, there's stuff in the soil, then we need to understand again, why is it harder with something going on? Let's figure out what's that hardness going on. Uh, and more with the chemical analysis, the type of carbon, the age of the carbon. There's things that we still haven't done yet. But just the basic soil analysis in a positive direction, saying that there's something different going on here. And we're open about that. We haven't published an article yet because we want to finish up our soil work. And then Sally and Bill, who are both scientists, they will get a paper out about it. But again, this is kind of how we're progressing and trying to do our work. It's sad in the past, people, Ron, he did his best. The only reason why I'm involved because I was a kid and I heard about it from him. Oh, but at the same time, he was very easy to make a claim and say, "Hey, this is this, this is that," and now you're going back trying to prove it, and so you waste a lot of time and money. But the basic site, this site was discovered before him, so it's not like people will say, "Oh, this is Ron White's site. He's a con man." This is not Ron White's site. It was found in '59. He got involved in the late '70s, and mainly his work was done in the '80s, and it was some basic stuff. I don't say basic, but it was some. I don't want people. He put this on the internet, and all his Ron White followers will attack me now. Um, and they support what we're doing too. So it could be. I don't mean anything down on what he did. What I'm just saying though is that he didn't do like excavations. He tried. And the Turks only let him do some of these things like metal detector work and GPR. And then he did do, as I mentioned, the soil analysis of certain locations. And so now we're trying to go beyond that, do more with the tools we have today. So what the Turks will allow. So we'll see. Now, some people will ask, well, why haven't you done excavations? Hey, we've asked. It's not like we're not asking the Turks. But it's always been to, okay, well, see what else you can do besides that. They always come, so, okay, well, we're going to do as much as we can without disturbing the site. And then if we can prove as much as we can with that, we'll go back to them and say, okay, look, we would like to excavate. It's very fragile. It's an earthen site. It's not a solid rock. So it's very fragile. If you put a big pit, people come to take a picture of the boat shape. If you take a big pit in the side of this boat, you're going to ruin the site. That was one explanation we got. Politicians talking too. But even Dr. Salibar Tutan, who's a geologist, he's against excavations. He said, look, it's so fragile. We got to find a different way to study it. And that's where we're doing, we would like to do the core drilling, which has not been properly done. So we'll see if we can do it this year or next year, get these really good cores. Now I'll answer the question, how shallow is it? Again, we go back to what the critics say. There's this one line of criticism that says it's a shallow basement rock that's right there and the mud's going around it. So we'll find out if that's solid basement rock for sure, or whether it's floating in the mud flow and the base of rock is, 100 meters down or something. It's in this valley. So hope that was a long, long answer.
No, it's perfect. I mean, you said a lot of interesting things about the more recent and modern research that has been done. But before we move on to that and your research team, from the research that you mentioned that was done in the past that could still stand to today, what would you say is the best piece of information that we have in favor of Noah's Ark, and what is a piece of information that can still stand today that is against that claim?
From past research?
Yes, I mean before the research that you have done with more
Well,
modern technology.
so well, one thing we have video of it, but and this is where I would say half the critics will accept it. Others will say, "Oh, they faked it somehow." There's a metal detector scans in the '80s that showed a pattern every 3 feet or every 9 feet in some locations, and that's where you have these old photographs where they're connecting the construction ribbon together, and it's showing this pattern of metal. That was only inside the boat, according to the people on video being talking about it. Baumgartner, um, who he's on video in the old raw archives, saying, "Wow, we got a great results here. We have a pattern every so I don't forget how many feet they said." Um, so whether he denies that now, it's on video what they did back then. I think that's a really key piece that was non-destructive. That it suggests there's near surface activity or results from something's decaying that even affects near the surface because the metal detector doesn't go too deep, unlike GPR. But these were the best. I think they used White's Electronics, an American company, and they gave Ron the best models. So you have these massive, coil heads. So I don't know what they can go down to. It depends on the soil type too. If it's high iron or clay, you're going to get bad results. But I believe, definitely there was hot spots in a pattern. So I think that was a key thing. The measurements, I've been there with tourists who measure, they want to see it themselves. So we measure on the ground. We get the 300 cubits, we get the 515 feet. That, this was done in the past though. Um, Again, the measurements, let's see what else. The GPR, what's interesting about the GPR, again, you have this conflict with people. Can they use different antennas? So we had Ron did his own GPR. The very initial one they did was with a 500 megahertz antenna, which is pretty shallow. The higher the megahertz, the less it will penetrate, but the higher resolution. So, like 500 megahertz, usually, unless it's shallow features, you're not going to get pretty deep in the soil. But if you do 250, 200, 100, or below, you're going to go much deeper and the penetration and get like looking for objects down below, but you'll get less resolution. So if it's a big object, you could see it. But if it's like a coin or, like a hammer or whatever, you're not going to find it. Um, so Ron, though, said that he got because he made little models of what he said it used to look like, but he said he used different antennas. I haven't seen video. I do believe he did. I don't think he lied about it. But there was no like published report. It was his little book he made, and then he made his own video about all his research. But there is not what they did with the '87 GPR that Baumgartner and both Dr. Baumgartner and Dr. Barak Tutam did. Now they published all their scans in that report. It's on our website. And they talk about the antenna they used. I think that one was a two. I think it was 150. I think it was a 250 or 200 megahertz. So it was a lower frequency than Ron's. So it went deeper than that 86 survey. But Ron even said he again used different antennas. But I know Tom Finner, who's the guy who ran the radar, a geologist, but he was the radar operator for the group. He says we cannot duplicate Ron's results. Again, they used a different antenna than Ron. Ron was getting shallow results. They went deep, but they did find, you read the report that was published by all of them. And at the end, they say there's nothing in here that goes against it being Noah's Ark. And so that report, I think, is really good because it does show that there's some type of, when you put in the terrain topography, because, the ship, you see photos, it has a central hump. whether that's material that's collected and decayed, so you have this like collapse of the ship, or as the critics will say, it's a ridge of rock. But you have the central hump, so it's not like a flat. There's little valleys, and it's not just a flat ship on top where you see in the photographs. So when they apply the terrain correction to the data, they're seeing that the reflections are getting about 4 meters down, I think it was. And you see it in their data, a lot of the scans, you'll see this double, like a V shape. When they correct it with the terrain, it comes to be almost planar, like a flat plane, reflection across most of the site. And so that's where they were like, oh, we need to core drill down to see what that is. And of course, they failed on that the next year. But I think that's something you can say, hey, they were seeing something that was consistent across this site that they didn't figure out what it was. And that you can say it's kind of the last. They wrote a report, and that was it. No one's done anything since up until now, or in more recent times. In regards to showing that there is not just a random rock, and definitely not a solid block of rock, you can point back to these like the GPR, and for patterns of metal, you can say the metal detectors. I think those are the key things. And again, the shape and the people measuring it. Now, what have somebody done in the past that they can say, well, maybe this is natural? And I don't think there's something that disproves it. Until more work is done, you can't say, well, one thing disproved it. Otherwise, I would not be wasting my time out there. Um, yeah, I have no. It's not like it's my honor or my name is involved. Who am I? So for me, I think there's something there. That's why I'm involved. It's not like I need to do this to preserve the Jones name or something. I think there are things where if you look at the story, you have to be really into the story to understand things, some of these claims. But it's more about stuff outside, especially where Ron was claiming that are again that we've disproved. Not about Noah's Ark, um, but that was wrong at his conclusion. Not to say he lied, but he just interpreted the data wrong. So one thing Ron claimed, and I did a paper which I presented at the seventh Noah's Ark symposium, and the paper's on our website, and I mentioned it in a short video. I have not made a long video about this on YouTube because I know it's going to cause problems for people, but I will. My focus is not just to stir up trouble, but I want to go with the data leads, and I'll tell you right now. You put this on your channel, that's no problem. But Ron claimed that he found ancient inscriptions up by the Iranian border. Now the site is about a mile downhill from Iran. Of course, we're on Turkey's side. And he showed these photographs of what he said was a ship shape carving onto the rocks of the border markers between Iran and Turkey. And he they had a reconstruction drawing. He said, well, he said, when I originally went up there in '84, I saw the complete the stele, this stone structure, and then the Turks broke it up, and then they put it into different border markers. And so, but the pieces, here's some photographs of the pieces. But he says that here's the reconstruction. So he drew out what he believed. It's at a boat shape, like the same shape you see from the aerial photographs. They had 8 faces, 2 birds above. That famous, that ridge of like a cliff. It's a saddleback ridge limestone rock above the ark, and then a mountain that you don't see anymore right beside it. He says this was the drawing of what he saw carved on the rocks. So, man, you have a drawing, a mile away from the boat shape, an ancient drawing that you can say, wow, the people, maybe tourists, 5,000 years ago, who knows, thousands of years ago, carved this. We have all these ancient historians who said pilgrims and tourists came out and they saw the ark up to the time of Christ, maybe even past the time of Christ, and then people forgot where it was. But people writing about it, so you could still see parts or portions of the ark. So who knows? Like, so the idea that you found an ancient inscription is really key. And you have this broken piece that says like you see like an oval end of like a rounded end, and it does look like the ship shape, but you don't see any faces in it. And so that was all Ron provided, but he would talk about it in interviews, and it's in his book and things like that. So when he died, everyone's tried to get up there to see it. Even when he was alive, he tried to bring people and the Turks. Back then, when he first went up there, it was easy to do stuff. Now it's a controlled zone, like fences, border walls, all that type of stuff. So it was very hard to get up there. Now we met a Turkish archaeologist. She was a student. She had her bachelor's. She was working on her master's. We don't work with her anymore, but at the time, I told her, "Hey, if you want to do something for me," I paid her. I said, "Okay, we'll give you, thousands of dollars. Get me up to that border. I would like to document these markers." So we made 3 trips. She was able to do the job. And the interesting thing is, or the cool thing is, I was able to fly a drone. So we went up the first trip, and we finally saw the markers. They were behind barbed wire on the Turkish side, the right beside it. So we couldn't access the side that had the so-called inscriptions, which was on the Iranian side. And it was different blocks of stone cemented together to form a pillar, but maybe not too high. Again, you can see this documentation on my website and Ron's old videos. Um, Once we saw that, and the general in charge of the area said, "Well, we can't let you go through the fence. The other side's mined. It's a border with mines. You blow yourself up." So we knew it was well protected, that no one touched it because it's hard to get to, number one, and number two, it's behind this fence and a mine. So we assumed, okay, well, let's work on trying to get permission to figure out how to document the other side, because it's not like going to be taken away or someone's going to steal these rocks, because it's in this really safe zone. So then the guy suggested, the general up there said, "Well, you can fly a drone and fly it and take the photographs. And she just need photographs of all the sides, especially the Iranian side." So I thought, wow, how are you going to do that? That you're basically flying it into Iran, and then you need all this permission, blah blah blah. Well, within a month, we got permission. So that lady helped us really. She said it had to, and she brought me. It wasn't just her doing it. She didn't know what she was doing for this stuff. So obviously, I had to go along. But she told me, so we had to get the permission all the way to Ankara, which is the capital. I don't know who they talked to, but they got permission um, for me to fly my own drone. It wasn't even the military flying it up there. So I had very strict orders, instructions. The general watched what I was filming most of the time. Basically said you can't film the big area. You have to take pictures, no video. You have to take pictures of just what you're trying to focus in on. I never asked them, like, what did the Iranians on the other side know? Because I assumed they were alerted that we're going to be doing this. I was thinking, what if my drone, DJI drones, which I use, they could fly. They have this history of flying away, just like disappearing on their own. By this was 2022, so by then they were less likely to do that. But I was thinking of, oh, it's going to crash or set off a mine, or these are expensive equipment too. Cause the international incident, but I was able to fly my drone into Turkey. I'm sorry, into Iran, and take all these pictures. So then we noticed when I got the pictures back, and we started comparing it, we noticed on the Turkish side of these border markers, they put in, I don't know, it's not Roman numerals, but whatever you call it, like our number system, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see it's like the marker where Ron said the boat was on, as marker number 65. So on the Turkish side, sprayed in black is 65. 500 meters away is another marker. It says 66, 67, then over there 64. And I documented four, I think of them, or five of these markers. And so it's the same pattern. Turkish side have this. Now the Iranian side, they have numbers too. And the Iranian side, the numbers are in Farsi, which is very similar to Arabic. So I recognize some of them because they have some of the numbers are the same, but others are not. Well, guess what? The number 5 in Farsi is an upside down heart. And you look very closely at Ron, in fact, we didn't have to fly the drone for this. You looked very closely at Ron Wyatt's black and white photograph. He's standing up by the marker and he's pointing, and you see this boat shape that's broken. You look very close. It's not the pointed boat shape, because the very end, the carving actually curves up. So it's part of the half of the heart. That was the Farsi 5. And then when you look at the other ones, so now that's not even there, because they always reconstruct it, or now it's like painted black, so they don't even carve it on the rocks anymore. These numbers on the Iranian side, But if you look at on the other ones, they have the Iranian numbers. So it has 65, 66, 64. And so then you're like, oh. And then in Ron's book, or his widow wrote, but in the book, they have one more marker that sadly I did not document, because I didn't ask permission. For whatever reason, I thought these markers were all like nearby. The one that he also photographed is way up at the very end of this escarpment, this cliff. So it's like the pinnacle. There's a Turkish military checkpoint, not checkpoint, but tower up there. Well, that's the border too. There's a marker, and so you can see in Ron's photograph, he's standing next to this border marker, and he has the number, and it turns out to be 63, I think. But he interprets the three, which is that you look at the Arabic or Farsi, look up Google what a three looks like. He interpreted that to be the bird, like it's a wing. It has this like thing. It looks like a wing. But even his drawing, his reconstruction of what you see in his reconstruction, it doesn't match exactly what's in his photograph. In his photograph, you realize no, it's not even a bird, but in his reconstruction, it's a bird. But here we have the photo of the actual carving, and so then you realize, oh, that's 63. Now, I don't have a drone photo of that, but we have his photographs. And again, it shows this pattern that they were marking, they numbered the border towers, these stone pillars. So that was one thing that was a disappointer. I mean, it doesn't disprove Noah's Ark. These are things outside of the boat itself that he was trying to, trying to find more proof that, for things. And he misinterpreted big time the data there. I'm not going to attack him. He did a lot of hard work out there, but that's something you could say that that didn't pan out. It's not well known about this point. It's on the website, but I haven't made like a big video saying no, we disproved Ron White. But the other thing that we're working on that we don't know what will the results be. Visually you can say okay, there's a problem, and that's the anchor stones. I'll just say that visually you look at them, they're basalt, which is volcanic rock. You're in a volcanic area that Mount Ararat, a lot of the big mountains around there are all volcanic. Now our site, we have sedimentary layers. There's some volcanic rock mixed in the mud flow, but it's you're finding sandstone, limestone, fossils. So you're talking about shallow water seashells, corals. But anyways, where the village was about 20 miles away, where you find most of these stones that Rom was saying they're anchor or drogue stones. Um, when I first talked to him on the phone, I was a kid in high school and middle school. The big thing is if these are from Noah's Ark, then you think they'll be different. Like they wouldn't be the same stone where he started. I mean, where he landed. Like the stone would be unique. It would be some. Let's say he started in Pennsylvania or like Middle East somewhere. And then whatever the local stone is, if he tied these stones to the boat, now I don't know if Noah's Ark could still have drogue stones because it's a good way of stabilizing ships. But these stones themselves, are they actually Noah's Ark drogue stones? We're gonna get to the bottom of it. But when I talked to Ron, he's like, "Oh, I was told." He told us me. He said these were This is a type of granite that's only found in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I was a kid. I don't, so oh wow, this is great. So they're unique. There's no granite in this area. It's from Michigan. Maybe Noah's Ark started in America, or it depends on how the continents were together back then. Anyways, so that was my thing. But then you get out there and look at the stone. You bring in even Christian geologists and regular, not regular, but non-Christian, like there's the Turkish geologists and geophysicists. They're like, oh no, this is basalt. I mean, you can, I'm not a geologist, but you can look at something and say, okay, this is marble, this is granite, this is basalt. You can just tell visually by the crystal size and the color and that. Yeah, this is volcanic rock. So and the when you think of volcanic rock, like the village where it's at, it sits on this lava bed, and all around it is volcanic rock. So you can say the logical, without even doing any testing, you can say, oh, the logical conclusion you can say is that these stones came from nearby because it's a volcano there, a volcanic cone here, it's on a lava bed. Here's some volcanic rock with holes. But I'm not going to do that. So we're going to fully test it. We already taken our samples. We just haven't sent them off to a lab. But we taken samples of almost all the stones that are visible today, and then outcrops of volcanic rock nearby. And so now I was trying to figure out how we're going to do this because, again, it comes down to you don't have scientists really interested in doing this type of work. So I've been kind of been like this. I'm a researcher, but I'm not a geologist or archaeologist. So my goal has been like a facilitator, try to get people interested, bring them out, like the GPR experts, like core drillers or whoever, like connecting back with Dr. Sally Brock Tuton. And so I told Sally, hey, let's test this. It's never been done. Everyone just says, hey, these are anchor stones to take a picture. Let's actually test them. Uh, and not to disprove anyone, just to see, hey, I can have final proof of where they're from. And so I'm like, how do you do this? I'm not a geologist. And it just so happened 2 years ago, I was looking at the news. Or, I get these because always see, I'm always looking at archaeology or science news. So Google feeds you what you like. And there was an article there that was a peer reviewed article by an Israeli scientist. Now, they had tested basalt stones from near the Sea of Galilee in Israel, and they explained the whole process, what they did in their article. It was a journal article. It wasn't a news article. It was in the news, but anyways, they explained their whole methodology and what they did and the equipment they used. And so now we can do the exact same thing with this. And what they were trying to show is these cities from the time of Christ in the Second Temple period around the Sea of Galilee. They're actually all made from basalt, black, volcanic rock. They want to know where do they come from? Are they nearby source? What it means about the economy, the effort involved, and they found they were able to do isotopic testing and get the exact from the minerals in the in these rocks, find the source which was nearby. So we would like to do the same with these. Later I asked Ron, it might have been after he had passed away, it might have been one of his family members, who said it was this Upper Peninsula granite. And I found out it was a biblical. He had a PhD, but he was not a geologist. It was a Dr. Bill Shea who's passed away, and I knew him, but he was a biblical scholar. You would say maybe he's an archaeologist, but his degree was not in geology. I don't know how he got to granite, but none of the there's so far been 26 found. Ron found 12 in his lifetime, 11 or 12 after he died. Others have found more, but I've never seen one of them that's granite. There's no granite in that area right there. So if it is granite, it would stick out like a sore thumb. There's no granite. Um, so that's so those are two things you could say from the past where and I think there's some more little details about from the GPR work, but those are the big things I could think of where we're understanding it better, or we will get the final answer on some of these things. For whatever reason, people just don't wanna test it, just wanna repeat, say, "Hey, this is what it is."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Well, I want to dive deeper into your specific research, but well, I just want to let you know that we're past the hour mark. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
well,
want to
we might
continue
have
or
because I do have to get up early. Tomorrow's, the
yeah.
first day of the German tour group. We might have to save that one for part 2.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm up for it.
Yeah.
We've
Okay,
covered
sounds
the
good.
the first part, the previous research that has been done. So the
Yeah,
second part
that
could
was
be
great.
your specific research.
For sure. Okay, sounds good.
Perfect. So if I want to know or people want to know more about your research and the story of the site, you have a website, right?
Yeah, so we have pro and con papers, everything we can find about the site that we've done, of course, or other people have done, is on noahsarkscans.com. So Noah's Ark scans with s.com, one word, noahsarkscans.com. And we have videos on a YouTube channel, but the YouTube channel covers other stuff like in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Israel. But their YouTube channel's Discovered Media. It has video of my travels and also our research and podcasts like yours where I talk about this stuff. That's a Discovered past tense. Discovered Media is the YouTube channel, and that same name is used on Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, much up there. But and then our Nose Scans project had its own Facebook page too. But I think the best, it's not like we're doing something every day out there. So the website has that's the best place to go, and then at the bottom they can link to the different social media sites.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks. Well, it was a great conversation.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
certainly touched a lot of points.
Well, you can digest it and have any other follow up questions. I'm more than happy to next time go through it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.